everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, I'm annoyed. I'm irritated. I'm perturbed. I'm disgruntled.
I learned recently that one can actually be gruntled.
I think the state I seek to increase my state of gruntlement.
Good.
Gruntlitude? Gruntelism?
Gruntolosity? I don't know. I think
gruntology would be the opposite of what we're talking about tonight.
Yes.
Because tonight we are discussing pet peeves. And the idea of
our particular pet peeves and kind of where they come up against the virtues and why that bothers us.
Exactly. So before we begin, lest we face the peeve of having an empty glass before us.
Peeve of being parched.
What, pray tell, are you drinking this evening?
I opted for just a little glass of Bailey's on ice. Nothing, very simple. I realized that it was coming on our recording time, so I quickly grabbed something out of the refrigerator, and that's what it was.
Very good.
And you, sir?
I have in my semi-visible glass here, like magic, a glass of Educated Guess 2019 Cabernet. Educated Guess, which is from the Roots Run Deep winery in Napa that we've had occasion to visit. Lovely facility, tasting room, and the wines, their range of wines is far beyond what you usually see, which is their Cabernet. Their Cabernet is quite nice, but they offer quite a range of wines, and this is nice and paired nicely with dinner, and I'm enjoying it now. So
good.
Here you go.
Cheers.
So the first thing I think is that's necessary is defining what a peeve is and why it's a pet peeve.
Okay.
And I think that a peeve is a minor annoyance.
Yes.
What makes it a pet peeve is a recurring minor annoyance. It's not really important enough to be very upsetting, but it's irritating like a pebble in your shoe.
Well, and it's personal. It may not bother everybody, but it bothers the crap out of you.
Right.
And that's why it's your pet peeve.
Right.
It's yours.
And as I may have stated upon occasion, I believe I have a menagerie of peeves. I don't like to be or think of myself as fussy, but I think of myself as particular, and I dislike
discerning.
And the things that upset me most, and I think you put it this way, the peeves that are most annoying fall into the categories of how did you put it? It was
people being oblivious or people being inconsiderate.
Exactly. And inconsiderate violates courtesy. And oblivious violates the principle of.
Well, I don't think that gets to the virtue so much unless you consider most, I think the oblivious behavior comes from a self-centeredness,
which is a lack of humility and a lack of courtesy.
Yeah.
And a lack of honesty.
Right.
And a lack of courage.
It can be from a sort of selfishness, but that's the two. It's kind of a fine difference between when someone's simply not paying attention and when someone doesn't care enough to pay attention.
Right. So I have arranged my menagerie of peeves into exhibit areas.
Okay. See, and my peeves are more free range.
Oh, free
They
range
can,
peeves.
they can come upon me at any moment for all reason.
So the first pavilion of peeves falls under the category of driving etiquette, or and specifically poor driving etiquette.
Yes, good. I've got a couple in there.
It's become particularly noticeable since during the last couple of years, I wasn't driving as much and people weren't driving as much. And going back out on the roads, all the bad behavior seems to have concentrated into the first times people go out onto the road. And and I'm seeing a lot more of it. And maybe it's just that I wasn't experiencing it, but I think one of the first ones is no lane discipline. And that just bugs the crap out of me when people they're not paying attention. They're doing other things. They're just,
wandering
drifting
back across
and
the
they're
lane.
like on the line. They're crowding me. They're crowding my lane. It's unsafe, but it also is really irritating.
Yes.
Similarly, the speed weavers, the guys in, it's usually occasionally you'll get the crotch rocket motorcycles doing this, but particularly with the weather getting better, but it's often, I see it in Camaros and Dodge Challengers and Chargers.
Really?
Yeah.
I tend to see it more in the European sports sedans like BMWs and Audis.
I don't see it so much from them, but I do see it from the Japanese, the modified Japanese tuner cars.
Tuners
Yeah.
are a whole thing. Yeah.
And they're going really fast, but they're weaving in and out. They're not giving enough room. And I would, years ago, there was a really horrible multi-car pile up fatalities
Mhm.
because of that behavior. And yet people haven't learned. So that it just it's irritating to see that.
There's another one of, yes, I see that. And the someone coming up behind me, I tend to be in the passing lane most of the time because I'm usually passing.
Yes.
Someone who comes up behind me at 90 and won't let me take enough time to get in front of the car I'm passing before they have cut over and are passing me on the right.
Exactly.
That's the kind of what you're talking about. More
exactly.
specific.
Yeah.
That is only slightly, to me, more irritating than someone who's in the passing lane when I cut behind them at 90 and they won't get out of the way.
Well, it's like what George Carlin said about that,
Yeah.
Yeah, but left lane hogs who are not going with the speed of the flow of traffic, but are slower and not using it for a passing lane, and they're slow, and as if they are arrogant enough to say, no, you're not going to pass, you're not going to do this, you're not going to because the speed limit is this, and so I'm going to do that, or under it, it's a limit, so I'm going, it's a fundamental lack of understanding of the realities of driving, and driving with the flow of traffic. I think similarly, I want to mention merging, that there are two ways to merge. One is to get over as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And the other is something called a zipper merge, where you wait until the end and then people take turns merging. The zipper merge or lack of it in any particular situation is not the fault of the drivers. It's the fault of the people who haven't put up signage saying either
Yes.
merge now or zipper merge ahead or something like that, because there are two ways of doing it. And people don't know, so they pick the one they're used to, and that just leads to a mess.
Well, the zipper merge works fine at low speeds on surface roads.
Right.
It doesn't work so well at highway speeds, where because that requires everyone to slow down to the point where you can make those decisions and figure out what other drivers are doing. And, somebody has to slow down to let you in and whatever. If everybody maintains highway speeds and just gets over as soon as they can, that's the way to do it.
Right. But I think signage is would help that understanding.
Well, sure. The problem is that with the zipper merge, somebody who doesn't know how to do it or isn't confident enough to do it correctly slows down the entire lane. And when the lane slows down, the right lane slows down and the left lane keeps going, you can't merge.
Right.
So
and it's similar to people who don't understand how to use a roundabout.
Well, and this is another one of my pet peeves is people who don't hit highway speeds on an on-ramp.
Yes.
They go 45 until the last, 10 yards and then punch it and try and find a space to move in. Yeah. So
yes, people who don't look ahead and won't get over and don't understand that, and again, it's either obliviousness, which is a kind of self-centeredness and a lack of awareness, a lack of courtesy, or they just don't care, and which is also a violation of courtesy and humility. Bad parking lot behavior is
that was my next one. The segue from driving behavior to grocery cart disposition.
Oh yeah. Just leaving it anywhere. Well, and there are some stores that I started actively avoiding because their parking lots were a nightmare.
Oh,
because
yeah.
The way people would park or drive or simply not pay attention. Although I do recall the wonderful little sequence in the movie Fried Green Tomatoes where Kathy Bates, a character, is waiting to pull into a parking space, and two young women pull in ahead of her, and one gets out and says, "We're younger and faster." And so she rams their parked car and says, "I'm older and have more insurance." And I thought that I wouldn't never do that, but I thought it was very satisfying.
Yeah.
I mean, even going way back, there was a W.C. Fields movie where it was one segment of this larger movie where each person in the movie got $1 million and followed what they did with it. And he bought a fleet of cars. And these were like they were open. They were like Model Ts, a little more advanced than that.
Phaeton.
And what's that?
They were Phaetons.
Well, they were.
That's not a brand, it's a type.
Right. Okay. But every time he would see somebody driving badly, he'd run him off the road, wreck his car, and simply get in another one. And he had a fleet of drivers, and by the end, all the drivers and he were packed into the one car. Again, fantasy, but so the parking lot behavior segues very nicely into public space etiquette, which is the next pavilion over in my menagerie of peeves. Sidewalk hogs, similar to left lane hogs, but these are people who spread out to occupy the entire sidewalk. That maybe it's a group of people and they're walking, they're not paying attention to people behind them, in front of them, and they spread out and take up the whole sidewalk. And I had somebody, there was actually in a store once, there was a kid, it's like a teenager, and his father, and we're in a store, and the kid was just like, walking back and forth and blocking everything. I could get past him. I said, "Excuse me," and walked past him. As I walked past him, I heard him say, "Yeah, excuse you." I turned around and I looked at him, with the
Yeah, right.
like,
The glare. Yeah.
and I pointed at him, and he ducked behind his father. And then I saw his head peek out from behind his father, and I went like this, and he ducked back behind his father, and I kept walking. But similar to that, that was
Well, yeah, this is a subset of the sidewalk hog is the grocery aisle hog.
yes, blocking the shopping aisle with the cart, or somebody who's right in the middle, leaves their cart in the middle, and then is looking for what they want,
Right.
and you can't get past on either side.
Or they're on their phone at the same time, and the conversation has gotten to a point where they have to actually stop and talk, but you can get by them, but there are other people there. You've got to figure out, you've got to wait while somebody passes them or whatever. And yeah, it's just, that's both. I think it's oblivious and inconsiderate.
Right.
Because you should know when you're in a situation like that you might be in someone's way if you stop and do something besides shop.
Yes. Similarly, people getting off an escalator and stopping right there when there are people behind them.
Yeah.
It's like, really?
But you can cause a pileup.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that people in a queue, in a line, who are crowding a queue. They're not, particularly with social distancing. I mean, it's gotten at least better. People are more aware of giving some space to the person in front of them, but I've seen that before. People just crowding in, there's a line, and they're just getting as close as they can and trying to, thinking that by getting closer, they're going to speed things up.
Yeah. I've actually a few times in my life, I've just turned around and looked at somebody and said, "You got to be somewhere,"
Yeah. Well, I'm very willing to turn around to somebody and say, "Excuse me, could you back up, please?
Yeah.
You're too close." No, really,
I have a question. What's your problem?
Yeah. Well, I think that applying the principles of weaponized courtesy would be to not assume ill intent, but assume obliviousness.
Yeah.
And that they would be willing to take correction. Keeping in mind that if somebody is close enough to be within arm's reach, they're too close.
Yes. Well, the old adage of never assign malice to what could be more easily or more as likely explained by
incompetence.
Yeah.
Ignorance or incompetence. Yeah.
Yeah. So I try that. And then I realize ignorance is no excuse.
Well, but I think the idea is that if you assume in your response that they're simply oblivious or unaware,
right,
you're more likely, it's tactical, you're more likely to get a positive response. Excuse me. If you get an aggressive response, I think that, and we talked about this in our episode about the incident at the Oscars, that embarrassing someone publicly and getting the crowd on your side is a technique.
Yeah, can often be more effective.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think that's useful in a situation like that. So moving on, and this is one that I think in some ways we can both relate to, although I have some examples specific to me. Student and or colleague behavior that violates courtesy, honesty, and perseverance, fortitude, and
I think we have also shared this student, colleague, and customer behavior.
Yes. Not reading the directions.
Okay.
If you read the directions and have a question about the directions, no problem.
Right.
But if you just don't bother reading them, that's just irritating.
Yeah.
And not asking questions when you have legitimate questions is also irritating. Not reading the syllabus. I don't know how many times I've ranted about that. I can't even count anymore, but it's similar.
That's kind of annoying. You said it so many times.
I'm sure that for my students, it's their pet peeve is hearing, because they've heard about it probably from every professor they've ever had. Missing a deadline is, and I think this is true whether or not it's something that it's more of a peeve when it's somebody I was collaborating with on a project, and all the pieces have to come together and they are late in theirs, and it holds up everything. And that starts to rise above the level of a peeve into a real piss me off situation.
Yeah. Well, and that's with customers too. I get all the time, and they've got a deadline, but they aren't giving me the components I need to actually do their work. But they still expect it. They still expect it at the same time.
I had colleagues who would have the information about something we were supposed to do, and it would sit on their desk until just before we were supposed to get it done. And then inevitably Friday at 10 minutes to 5, they say, "Oh, we got this thing and it's due Monday."
Well, I'm not sure how you're going to get that done over the weekend because I'm leaving.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think the real irritation of that is they would suffer no consequences from that.
Well, that's what I mean. The consequence is it's not going to get done because I'm not going to save your ass.
Right.
So sorry. I hope everything's all right when I come back Monday, but sorry, that's a lesson you got to learn.
Yeah, I did have an occasion once where I had people working over the weekend to get something done after what the direction had been agreed to. And then Monday morning I came in and people told me that the one guy, the account guy, had changed the direction Monday morning after it had been agreed to. And this was beyond a peeve. This was an actual anger situation. Yeah. Because it was so discourteous to the work of the people who had given up their weekend to put in this work so it could be delivered on time with and quality, and he changed direction, and now the work wasn't valid and it wasn't going to be good because we didn't have the same amount of time to work on it. So
I remember an incident where, and this was not well, it was a customer to me, but he once hired me. Now, after letting me go, this was right after he took over the business that we had both worked in for a little while. For letting me go, he needed some keyline work. This was back in the day when you still pasted up boards and stuff.
yeah.
And I don't remember the guy's name who became the sort of general manager.
Oh, I do.
I don't remember his name. I remember him, but I don't remember his name. He called me up because he knew me, at least. He had my number. So he called me up and asked if I would do this freelance job. And I said, sure, and I come in, and I came in, and that guy wasn't there, but the owner was there, and he's going over the job with me. And this was a Thursday, and they needed it Monday. They needed to go to press Monday. Now, that's cutting it too close.
Right.
There were 40 hours of work. There was
Yeah.
40 hours of work between Thursday and Monday that I put in. And I quoted him a rate, and he wanted me to come down on my rate. And I said, look, it's Thursday. You've got really 2 days to get this done. And I'm here right now, and this is my rate. And it wasn't it's not an unreasonable rate. It was the rate,
Yeah, it was going. Yeah.
Keylining rate. And he went, well, yeah, fine. You're really holding me over a barrel. I said, okay, I'll take it, but I got to have this 9 a.m. Monday. Okay, fine. I took a big stack of boards, and I went home and I worked on them, and I worked, 11-hour days, 3 days in a row, got them done, brought them in Monday, set them down on the desk, and where's my check? And he said, oh, we're net 30. And I said, you're net 30. And I picked the boards right up, and I said, when did you say you needed these? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I need a check or you don't get these boards. We didn't agree to net 30. That's not a contract we have. You gave me a deadline. I met it. I want my pay. And he slams his checkbook on the desk, and he writes out a check, and he goes, here. And I said, thanks very much. Nice doing business with you. And I left. Didn't hear from him again. Probably just as well.
Yeah. And I will edit out his name.
Okay, fine.
In this, so that I can speak freely about him. I'm surprised he's not in jail somewhere, or in prison. Yeah. I did the greatest satisfaction I had from the years of association with him after he took over the business was when I walked into his office and said, I'm resigning. I'm leaving. I have another position I'm going to. And he said to me, would it make a difference if I offered you more money? He didn't offer me more money. He asked me if it would make a difference. And I said, no. And that was it.
Yep.
And because and we are way outside of Peeves now. We are, It's related though. This is when the discourtesy, self-absorption, thoughtlessness actually rises to the level of the opposite of virtues, not merely annoyances, but just piss me the fuck off. Right. I went, there was a job we were doing, we were bidding on for a client, and client bought my ideas, and we were there, and it involved a multi-day model shoot for this catalog. And the client says, did you include a stylist in the budget? And he said, yes. And as we're leaving, he turns to me and says, what's a stylist? And I said, well, a stylist is what I told you we needed and gave you resources for, and you were supposed to include in the budget. And that represents a cut in the profit we will make on the job.
Yep.
Because we will need a stylist every day that we're there in the shoot. So dishonest. But as I said, I'm going to edit out his name.
All right.
So customer service.
Yes.
Specifically, and I have a lot of sympathy for people who work in customer service. A lot of them are very good. A lot of them are hardworking and underpaid. The peeve is not with the people doing the job. It's with the systems that are set up.
I think I have this peeve listed under blind adherence to bad rules.
Well, yeah, that's certainly part of it. But sometimes their ability to, they are not empowered to act outside those rules. And that's a problem with the organization they work for.
Okay.
So
what I get more annoyed. I see your point, and I get more annoyed with some service rep, for
right.
if or I should say I get less annoyed if I can tell that they wish they could help me and they can't. When I get annoyed is by someone who is sheltering behind the rule because they don't want to be bothered.
Right. And there's a difference there.
Yes.
So for example, you make a call, you've got an issue, so you call the customer service or the helpline. It takes forever to talk to a real person.
Yeah.
Press 1 if you're not from Earth. Press 2.
Habla español, número dos.
Yeah. Press 3 if you can see in the dark. Press 4 if and you do that, and you do that. It takes forever to talk to a real person. And then you find the person you're talking to is not the person you actually have to talk to. So you have to go through person after person. And every time you have to explain the situation again.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you get disconnected and you have to start over. Systems don't talk to each other. Yeah, there are some of those people who will, well, it's not I can't do, they're not trying to help, but a lot of times it's the situation, it's the system that they're working under that I blame. And why is the system set up that way? Because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Because it's more profitable for the company to not truly give a shit about their customers. And to do
they can
this
frustrate you enough to drop the issue.
Right.
Yeah. I've got a high tolerance for that.
Yeah, perseverance,
Mm-hmm.
fortitude, virtues that in combination with courtesy, because I will thank them for helping me. I'll ask them what they can do. If there's somebody else I should talk to, I will be so nice, not just courteous, but nice.
Yeah.
Because I know they're having a rough day. I know it's not their fault, which I will say, but can they help me? Can they find a way to help me? And I found that kind of persistence, certainly when you're talking to somebody in person, and
sure,
you say, let's figure, what do you think should happen here? What do you think should happen? If the company hasn't empowered them, I can empower them to tell me what they think should be done, and say, what do you think? And how can we make that happen? And that goes a long way. So it's one of the things we talked to when we talked about courtesy is responding to discourtesy with more courtesy.
Yeah.
Um,
When I get to the, well, I was talking about the blind adherence to bad rules. I occasionally run up against this in our hobby organization, where this ruling has come down from another body, and it's a look. This is between you and I. Talking to someone who is, and usually, and this is where the SCA bullying policy, I think, runs up against reality in some ways, where I was having this conversation with somebody just this weekend about how, because of our perceived rank and influence in this organization, which is only perceived, we really have remarkably little ability to do anything.
Right.
Certainly we can't affect how anybody else's SCA life goes on. But if someone is a newer person, a less experienced person, is trying to enforce a rule that isn't sensible on the ground, and I call them on it and I say, what, I don't understand. What's the problem here? This doesn't make any sense. If my tone isn't exactly right, I'm a bully, or I can be perceived as a bully. And the way the policy is kind of written is if someone thinks they've been bullied, that's bullying.
I would have to dig into the policy wording at some length to look at that and consider whether that's, because I tend to think of it as bullying is a repeated, the same way that it's a pet peeve because it's recurring. I think bullying is a recurring thing, although that may not be in the definition.
I don't believe it is. I haven't looked it up. It's a while since I read it. When it first came out, I read it, and I'm not remembering it clearly, but it is weighted heavily towards the victim, and that's all right.
Yeah,
as long as there's a fair view of what actually is happening. And I don't want to get so much into that.
right.
As the bad rule, it's easily to point. Sometimes you can say, this shouldn't apply here.
Well, in the same, I've also seen people try to, we would call them rules lawyers, try to apply a rule and understand where the edge of it is so they could skate along the edge of it. And,
sure.
And that pisses me off too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you're trying to take advantage of something,
right.
What I'm usually, when I speak up on something like this, it's not just because I'm inconvenienced. It's because this is obviously inconveniencing anybody in this situation, and it's pointless.
Okay.
The having to present a card that shows a certain status, having to produce the card when the person you're talking to absolutely knows that you have the status that the card shows, right? I mean, in our case, not like an authorization card or a membership card.
I have been carded trying to buy alcohol because the store policy is card everybody. And I mean, hello,
Yeah.
It's kind of absurd, but I don't blame the person.
Right.
It's the rule. Their adherence to a rule in that case is that their job, the store's license, all of that requires it. It's easier from their point of view to say, we're just applying it to everybody.
Yes.
We're not discriminating on any basis. We're applying it to everybody. Therefore, you can't find fault with us. Whereas if they said, well, obviously you're of age, but we don't think you are. And it turns out, well, why did you single me out? So
Right.
I also, there's also something that sometimes is referred to as malicious compliance with a bad rule. So for example, the teachers in Florida, because Florida has passed a really ridiculous, horrible piece of legislation intended, people are referring to it as the Don't Say Gay bill.
Right.
So teachers are saying, okay, so any reference to Mr., Mrs., a married family, boy, girl, any of that, I'm eliminating it. That I'll refer to everybody as they. We won't talk about, there's no Dick, Jane, and Sally and mom and dad and any of that stuff. Malicious compliance. So so I get your point, though that specific issue I'd have to dig into more deeply.
Well, and again, I didn't want to, I shouldn't even have delved into the bully thing. It's more about, I don't object to there being a bullying policy. I'm afraid that the way it's written, the way some of our rules are written, it's ripe for abuse in my mind.
Well, the tendency over the years has been to move from rules to policies. So a rule that said no more than a 90-degree swing of a greatsword moved to a policy that said no excessive force.
Right. Because
you and I could both generate hella excessive force with a 90-degree swing.
Sure, but the two don't become, the problem is that the 90-degree swing is at least a control. You can still pull somebody for excessive force, no matter how hard they swing. Right. It was to make it easy on marshals to spot someone who was probably using excessive force.
Yes, we are way far afield here.
Yeah. And from what I was getting at, and I'll return to it again. What I was getting at was the bad rule. Someone who, and I guess this is malicious, you call it malicious compliance, because in the case in my mind in particular was our cards have a duration, right? Our memberships.
Right.
And I had just stepped down from an office that required that duration. And I went to an event and someone who knew who I was, said they had to see my authorization card. And I said, I don't have my authorization card. I'm here to do something else. And well, the rule says you've got to show your authorization card. The only purpose in showing the card is to prove that you are authorized. For an absolute fact that I am authorized. And it was just the rule says.
Yeah. So hiding behind the rule.
Yeah.
As opposed to how can we fix this?
Well, and since there's nobody, I mean, you've got to show it, but there's no recording of you having shown it.
Right.
Anywhere. So, it was the same, it was similar with the COVID card showing at every practice recently. So there's the same 10 people showing up for practice and everybody has to line, the cards don't expire. You have to line up and show your card every time you're there.
So I think the problem you have is not necessarily, it's part of it is compliance with bad rules, but the bigger issue is the writing of rules badly.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So I'd like to move on to another issue. And this is a particular pet peeve of mine. Misuse of apostrophes, commas, quotation marks,
punctuation.
It just pet peeve of mine, along with and related to, I think, bad typography. People send me, and bad design, people send me examples of bad design that I put in a file, a bad design file,
Right.
with bad kerning, bad, which is, for people who don't know, the space between letters, using apostrophes for plurals rather than possessives, using unnecessary commas, putting quotation marks around things that shouldn't have them. It all just, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I get it.
I,
The classic sign that all caps block letters that says flicker,
yes,
and,
yeah,
and the
I
space
have,
between the L and the I is just that little bit too
yeah.
close.
Well, there was a billboard that said "Flick your Bic" set
Yeah.
in that. That was a classic example of that. Or Kids Exchange, which was a kids used clothing store. Kids Exchange, except the kerning was bad, so it read as Kid Sex Change,
Exchange.
which would have gotten them in big trouble in Florida, I'm sure.
Yes.
So bad
In
typography.
Texas. Yeah.
I think the yeah, we just got a flyer for a tree service that they stole the Optimus Prime logo. There was a company named something like Tree Service, Tree Service Prime, something like that. Used the word Prime and then had the Optimus Prime logo in it.
Well,
Like,
you mean the Autobots?
yeah, the
mask?
whatever that mask face thing.
There's Autobots and there's
I know, but Optimus Prime is a specific.
yeah, but I don't know that he's got his own thing. It's the Autobots.
I apologize if I have
Sorry,
I've stepped on a peeve of yours by not knowing, not being up on the iconography of Transformers after my time.
after mine too, really, but I get the difference.
But that sort of thing irritates me because it's so unreal. All the variations on got milk.
Oh yeah, that's just lazy design.
Yes.
Lazy and derivative.
Yep. And I think spoilers also are a pet peeve of mine. People who completely disregard spoilers. Okay, if it's Citizen Kane, I will tell you that Rosebud was something important to the plot. But spoilers for recent movies or stories or are that's
yeah,
mine too.
Yes, and it's inconsiderate.
Yes.
Right. And self-centered. I've already seen it. The fact that you haven't, it means nothing to me.
Yeah, I had a student once comment that they hadn't seen Star Wars, and all the other students, you haven't seen Star Wars? I said, hey, everybody doesn't know something. There's something that everybody doesn't know. I guarantee you, not all of you know everything about everything. But
a safe bet.
Yeah, I could have said not all of you know as much as I do, but they already knew that. But I said to the student, I said, you have a treat ahead of you. And then I told them about machete order of viewing the first 6 Star Wars movies, which is 3, 4, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6. You skip episode 1, you go 4, 5, which is Luke's story, and then 2, 3, which is Anakin's story, and then 6, where Anakin and Darth Vader, it's the denouement of that story, or the climax and denouement. And it makes sense. I do wish that what was rumored to be, and this is way far afield, the idea
Yeah.
that Jar Jar Binks was actually a secret Sith Lord who was only
Oh my
pretending
God.
to be inept, and in the second movie was going to be revealed to be, but that
You know what? Fan fiction ruins literature, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, but that actually was plausible in a lot of ways, as a long story. If I credited Lucas with having that sort of vision and patience, which
I do not know.
do
I'm
not.
sorry.
So yeah, so so we've covered a whole bunch. I'm sure there are more, but those are some of the big ones. And again, the reason for talking about these is that they are violate the virtues in small ways, but as we've talked about, the small ways can become big violations of the adherence to the virtues.
Right. Well, yeah. And there's a maintenance, right? Being mindful of small things usually leads you to be mindful of the more important things. If you're not mindful of the small things, can you be trusted with larger things? Right. I mean,
Okay.
that's think about that going forward, that if you're not mindful of small things, why would someone trust you with large things?
Yeah. Well,
And this
and
is
I have, as I've stated to students, I've told them this story. I had a professor who told me to misspell a word in the first paragraph of anything we sent to a client, so that the client would fix it and then believe that they'd done their job and then ignore the rest of what we'd turned in. I said, that he was wrong. He was completely wrong, because that undermines their confidence in everything you do. And then they will pick over every single word, punctuation mark, everything in greater detail than they would have if the writing is, and punctuation and capitalization and all of that is perfect.
Right. That becomes a snag if they're, rather than reading then the rest of the copy, they would just be looking for more mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
would disagree with that too.
yeah. Okay. I think that
should
unless you have more.
Oh, I've got tons, but a lot of them are not, I would have a harder time assigning them to the virtues, or violations of the virtues, like mispronunciations, your and your, there, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, those are misuses. Mispronunciations I have less of a problem with, because it often for me means the person has read a word but not actually heard it. So they're familiar with the word, but they just haven't been exposed to it in pronunciation.
Well,
although
but I'm
one of
talking
my
about words like library and
Yeah.
that, I mean, just poor like they've never read the word, because if you'd read the word, you'd see there's another R in there.
Yeah. The one that bothers me is in the singing of the national anthem, perilous, perilous, perilous. Singers often pronounce it perilous, 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 instead of perilous, P-E-R-I-L, peril, us, perilous. And one that I think one of my, I didn't even think about this until now, but when a word is mispronounced in common usage so frequently that it becomes common usage and actually gets a dictionary entry as an alternate pronunciation. mischievous is the
Mischievous.
correct word and pronunciation. Mischievous is not. It's not spelled that way. It's not pronounced that way. It's mischievous.
Correct. Now,
And
and I've heard, I'm the same way about pronunciation and idioms and phrases like that I asked recently someone, when did the phrase all of a sudden, 4 words, become, you've heard the phrase, right? When
yeah,
did it become all the sudden? Have
I've
you not
never
heard
heard.
this?
No,
You haven't
I've
heard
never
this
heard it.
pronunciation? I'm hearing it
No.
more and more. Maybe I'm just really tuned into it because it bugs me. But it's a misrepeating of something they've only heard, right? So it's the opposite, like you said, that the opposite of having read it and never having heard it pronounced. It's having heard it and never having read it, misunderstanding the pronunciation and repeating the misunderstanding.
For all intensive purposes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That
Instead
exactly
of for
that kind
all
of
intents and purposes.
and purposes. Right. And now, whenever I bring this kind of thing up, I get a pushback and said, oh, well, language evolves. Language has evolved over time. Language evolved a lot when there was no written language. Once written,
it's still evolving though.
It still is, but it's evolving, it's devolving. It's mutating, if you can call that evolution. Yeah, but yes, the English language has changed. Well, the English language has been influenced by lots of other languages.
Sure.
And I understand that. And yeah, things come into common usage and whatever. But if you know it's wrong, you can correct it.
Right.
It's not an excuse because, oh, well, the language is evolving.
Yes. Well, excuses rather than reasons also piss me off.
Yeah. Okay.
Someone posted a quotation online, and I said, well, actually, the quotation was said by this person, and it meant this because you omitted these things, and here's how it was accurately done. It was not done the way you did, and it was actually in this context. And their response was, oh, lighten up. No, you're wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. You're wrong.
No, you lighten up. So, I think we have covered it, unless,
no, I'm
unless
done.
there's more things that annoy you.
We could, if we had to stop, if we only stopped at things that annoyed me, or I've got all day, we could do this. So
Thank you, Captain America.
Yes. So
I can talk about things that annoy me all day. So
exactly right. So let's not, because it's only going to annoy others. And courtesy demands that we stop here.
So thank you for listening to Two Old Guys Tell Everybody to Get Off Their Lawn.
Yeah, right.
If you have peeves of your own, please add them to our menagerie. If you have topics that you would like us to discuss, please comment, and please like and share and subscribe to our efforts here. And thank you for your attention.
Very good. Nicely done, sir.
Thank you very much.
And,
so until then,
be thou
a good night
and true.